Good morning, everyone.
Good morning, Rabbi.
Good Tavach, Shua Tov. We are learning Mishna Nazir, Parakeh, Chapter 5, Mishna Gimel, Mishna 3. Okay, so we have to bear in mind that this is a continuation from the previous Mishnayos that I've dealt with the argument of Beis Shammai Beis Hillel about Hekdesh Toyos. If you sanctify something mistakenly, does the Hekdesh still come into effect? Now we're finally going to apply this to Nazir. Mishnah ben Nazir. If someone made a vow to be a Nazir. Now, what happened here was like this. He made a vow to be a Nazir in a certain manner. And he decided that he had not made the vow correctly. That was his assumption. He didn't make it correctly. As I say here, after making the vow, he decided that the expression he had used was not correct for a vow of Naziris, so that the vow never took effect. And because of that, what did he do? He was drinking wine because he figured he's not a Nazir. And then he decided to ask a sage, about his situation. And the sage said, no, it was a good vow. You are a Nazir. You are a Nazir. Okay? So now, what happens in this situation is that according to Torah law, he's still a Nazir. It's not like, if you become tummy, if you become impure from a dead body, you got to start all over again. But for drinking wine, there's no halacha to start over again. Now, Mayna Mishash Nadar. He counts his Naziris from the time that he made the vow. Meaning, let's say he made the vow 10 days ago, right? And day 5 and day 2, he decided, I'm not a Nazir, probably not a Nazir. And then a few days later, he asks the Chacham says, you are a Nazir. All right, so when does he count his Naziris from? The point that he made the neder, even though he drank wine after that, or from the time that he, realized his mistake? The answer is no. You count from the time that you made the vow. Now, let me read to you here from the bottom. This is true even though he should not have drunk wine without first asking if he was a Nazir, right? Should have asked. However, if a person who knew that he was a Nazir drank wine, he does not count the days on which he drank wine towards his Naziris. This is a rabbinic penalty for violating his Naziris. For example, if he vowed to be a Nazir for 30 days and he drank wine on 5 of them, he must be a Nazir for 5 more days after the 30 days are finished. Because before we allow him to bring his concluding offerings. Meaning, it's a rabbinic law. You drank wine when you weren't supposed to, those days don't count. But in essence, you are really but that's in the case where you knew it. But in this case where he didn't know, he should have asked, but he didn't, so he thought he wasn't a Nazir, then we don't penalize him. Then those days count. Okay? Now, Nishal lechacham v'hitirei. Okay? Now, if he asked a sage to release him from the vow, v'hitirei, if he asked the sage and the sage released him from the vow because, now, meaning a different case now, meaning, let's say the case over again. He made himself a Nazir. He decided that the Lashon is not he felt that it wasn't a properly made vow, and so he thought it'd take effect. No, I'm making a mistake here. Back up. Nisha lachacham v'tira means like this. If he asked the sage, and the sage released him from the vow because he wrote that the vow was indeed not made properly and never took effect. Before asking the sage, he had assumed that he was a Nazir. The opposite way around. He made a vow to be a Nazir. He thought he was a Nazir, and he began being a Nazir. Then he had a conversation with the Chacham, with a sage, and the Chacham said, you didn't make a proper vow. You're not a Nazir. Now, and what happened? You're not a Nazir at all. You never were a Nazir to begin with. And what happened? This person had already, because he thought he was a Nazir, he had already separated his animals that he's going to use for when he brings the karbanos, when he concludes his term of Naziris. Okay? So, he had animals, he had animals he already set aside for his sacrifices. Okay? What happens to those animals? What happens to them now? They go and pasture amongst the flock. He made these animals a sacrifice because he thought he was a Nazir. but he really wasn't a Nazir. So Beis Hillel say, we all know, at least that's the way it seems right now, that in that situation, those animals weren't consecrated. But they were consecrated, right? They were consecrated by mistake. And what's the halacha about them? Teitzev Yisra Beider. They can go and pasture amongst the flock. Just go back to being regular, good old animals. So the Mishnah continues, Amru Beis Hillel Beis Shammai. So Beis Hillel said this Beit Beis Shammai. Don't you agree in this case that it was a mistake in hektish and those animals can go and graze amongst the flock? Don't you agree to that? And if you do agree to that, then that should be a proof that a mistake in hektish is not a hektish, because that's exactly what happened. Right? Okay, we'll have to conclude. We'll have to stop here. In the middle of, I'll leave you in suspense for a couple of days, and we will finish up Mitzvah Shem after Yontif. Have a wonderful day, a good Tevach, good Yontif, Chag Sameach, and everything should be great. Take care, bye-bye.
Thanks, Thank you.